Round 2. Fight!
What's going on, everybody? Sean Ross here, and welcome back, guys, to another review where I will be talking about Chapter 177 for Tokyo Ghoul Re. And we're in the final stretch right now, guys. Only 2 chapters left until the ending of this series. This is my third to last review on a weekly basis for Tokyo Ghoul Re. And that right there is sinking in for me, the finality that the series that I have been following, doing live reactions and reviews for 70-so chapters right now, since chapter 106 of Tokyo Ghoul Re, the journey's almost over. So that right there feels very strange to me, but I don't want to focus in on the finality and the ending of this series. I just want to talk about this amazing chapter that we got this week with 177, because overall, this chapter was very simple, but it was constructed so well by Ishida. I loved how this chapter was crafted, because just taking the narration and the dialogue out of this chapter, when you go from beginning to end, the artwork tells the story beautifully, because it's mainly action-oriented, where you are following Kaneki in this nightmarish environment with these Kagane monsters with teeth. Their tongues are sticking out, they have Rize hair, and they are just bombarding Kaneki the entire time. And you go from panel to panel, you can easily understand what is going on until he reaches the center of the oviduct, runs into the dragon goddess Rize form, and then just cuts her down without any hesitation. That is without dialogue and just looking at the art and following the panels. But I think this chapter honestly gets elevated from the narration and the dialogue by Kaneki, because the narration takes us all the way back to chapter 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, way back to the beginning of the series, where that iconic phrase of "if you made me the main character of a story, it most certainly would be a tragedy" gets brought up yet again as a nice bookend as we are approaching the ending of the series. But then it gets expanded upon to where Kaneki's like, no, that was my mindset back in the beginning of the series. After all my growth and development, this is what I think right now. And after going through that monologue and seeing the journey of Kaneki cutting through these Kagane monsters and reaching Rize, I absolutely loved this chapter. So with that being said, guys, let's dive in and talk about chapter 177. I didn't really take too many notes on this chapter, because I do feel that this chapter was very simple in the way that it was constructed, but I just want to dive a little bit deeper into this chapter, in which I was kind of unable to do initially in my live reaction. So we'll start at the beginning of this chapter and work our way towards the end, where we had that climactic ending moment between Kaneki and then the new dragon formed Rize. But going back to the start of this chapter, you can tell that this was going to be a very interesting chapter just by the initial setup with what Ishida was presenting to us, because we see Kaneki standing here with his new Kagane blades out, standing atop this mountain mass of dragon Kagane, and Ishida is bringing back a quote that brings us back to the beginning of Tokyo Ghoul, to the ending of chapter 1, where we saw Kaneki after his incident with Rize and the steel beams. He's lying there in the hospital bed. He has his half ghoul nature starting to show. His ghoul eye is starting to open, and we have this narration starting in that chapter, and it gets brought back at the beginning of this chapter, where it states, "If, let's say, you were to write a story with me as the main character, it would certainly be a tragedy." I love the fact that Ishida is bringing this quote back as we are nearing the ending of this series, because not only in a way does this act as a nice bookend to the journey that we have been on with Kaneki through Tokyo Ghoul and now through Tokyo Ghoul Re, but this also goes to emphasize the growth, development, and the change in mindset that we have seen from Kaneki over the course of these 320 chapters. Going back to chapter 1, the Kaneki lying there in that hospital bed is going to view that quote much differently than the Kaneki that has gone on this journey and is now present in TG Re 177. And Kaneki demonstrates this by expanding upon this quote. After going on this long of a journey, he has now come to the realization that yes, he is in fact the main character of his own life story, but that can go for everyone living and breathing on this planet. Toka is the main character of her own life story. Rize is the main character of her own life story. And yes, even Furuta was indeed the main character of his own life story, and we just go on living, experiencing good moments, experiencing bad moments, and then at some points, our stories begin to overlap and intersect, and we begin to affect each other's lives, to affect each other's life stories. And that's when life can be summed up to one of two ways. We either do unto others, or others do unto us. And that right there is very powerful and a good summary on how life actually works, because look at Kaneki and Rize. They both are the main characters of their own life story, but when you go back to chapter 1, that moment when they interacted and their stories intertwined and intersected, things could have been a lot differently if things did not go that way. So if Kaneki and Rize never met and went through that moment, things could have been drastically different in the story for Tokyo Ghoul. And I like the way that Kaneki summarizes the push and pull of living your life story as he is fighting his way through this nightmarish environment, through these tentacle Kagane monsters, trying to get to the center, the nucleus of this oviduct. Because when you are living your life, you can either steal from others, or you can be stolen from. You can imprison people, or you can be the one imprisoned. You follow people, you can be the one being followed. You do unto others, have others do unto you. You affirm, you negate, you go through this push and pull process, but that is just how life works. But even though life may seem tragic, it might seem like loss or empty, everyone living strives forward because they go through their wretched days in order to become beautiful. And that is just a beautiful way to summarize the journey that Kaneki has been on, but also kind of give us like a philosophical look in on how life actually works. But now that I'm done talking about the meaning of life, let's talk about the journey that Kaneki was on during this chapter. And I think it goes without saying that the art looked spectacular in this chapter. It definitely was a feast for the eyes as we saw Kaneki fighting through this nightmarish environment, fighting against these gigantic and creepy tentacle Kagane monsters in the hopes of reaching the center of the oviduct to find the nucleus. But this fight was not easy for Kaneki because he was the size of an ant compared to these Godzilla-level threats of these Kagane monstrosities. But Kaneki was utilizing all of his Kagane abilities within this moment, where he is manipulating the shape and just the overall form of the Kagane blades that he obtained after coming out of Dragon. But one thing that was actually pointed out to me in the comments of my live reaction is that if you notice the different Kagane shapes that Kaneki is making, he has different Kagane forms. He's using Bikaku, Ukaku, and Kokaku type Kaganes within this chapter. And it honestly would not surprise me after coming out of Dragon that he now has the access to all 4 Kagane types and would be on that level of Shikurai to where he can now utilize all 4 different types of Kagane. But those new blades are definitely coming in handy in this chapter, and there are some gorgeous shots and panels of him just slicing through these monstrosities. But there were a few close calls to where Kaneki could have potentially died within this chapter, because we see him getting grabbed, being held, and chomped down upon by these multiple Kaganes. And there was even one moment, one page dedicated to just seeing the teeth chomping down on Kaneki's body. It really did remind me of the multiple tentacles looking like a multiple-headed Hydra coming in to attack Hercules. Things were really not looking good for Kaneki, but then we just see him burst forth from the Kagane monsters as if a nuclear bomb went off inside these monstrosities, and he is looking like some angelic being. He has Ukaku-type winged Kaganes coming off of him. He looks like an angel. It looks like he went through a metamorphosis, almost like a caterpillar into a butterfly, to where now he has a new purpose in life. This is a new Kaneki bursting forth near the ending of the series, and he is about to make a choice. And this is the big thing that I absolutely loved by the ending of this chapter, that it really did emphasize to me. Kaneki, throughout this series, has always had a hard time making a choice. We have seen that multiple times in crucial moments within this series. But here he is at the center, the nucleus of the oviduct, and he begins talking about, I need to choose, I need to consider which one I need to make, and I choose this one. And as he gets to the nucleus of the oviduct, we get to see, once again, the dragon form of Rize. And I love the look of the dragon form Rize. It's like some type of demonic goddess looking back at Kaneki, But this piece of dialogue coming from Kaneki goes to show the growth that he has seen over the course of this series, to where he is just looking at Rize and he just says, "Forgive me, Rize, I must kill you." He does this without any hesitation. He has made a choice to save the many in order to kill this one person. And we ended off with this double spread splatter page, which is left rather ambiguous as to who killed who within this moment. It could be Kaneki killing Rize, it could be Rize killing Kaneki, they could be killing each other. We will most likely find out next chapter who came out on top after this panel, but I think it is safe to assume that it was Kaneki not hesitating within this moment and kind of mercy killing Rize, getting her out of this tragic state, being attached to Dragon. But I like this phrase of thank you being on this last page because I kind of view this multiple ways. This can be Kaneki thanking Rize for sending him on this journey, because if he never met her in that moment, his life would be drastically different. But if this is not Kaneki saying thank you, it would be rather cool if this was Rize thanking Kaneki for killing her in this moment, because her life has been nothing but tragic ever since meeting Kaneki, because she's been incoherent, she's been crazy, she's been food deprived, and her life just has not been that great. So if it was not Kaneki saying that within this moment, I think it'd be rather cool if that was Rize, because her life turned out to be more tragic than Kaneki's over the course of Tokyo Ghoul. But that right there is where we end the chapter, and now we only have 2 chapters left until the ending of the series. 2 left, guys. I cannot believe that. I'm only going to have 2 more live reactions and reviews, and I will most likely be done talking week to week for Tokyo Ghoul Re. But I definitely want to thank you guys for being on this journey with me. This is the whole reason I started this YouTube channel, and it has been a fun journey thus far, talking about Kaneki, Toka, Nishiki, Tsukiyama, all the characters of Tokyo Ghoul. It has been a blast thus far, but I am really much looking forward to these final 2 chapters for Tokyo Ghoul Re. So that's going to do it for me here, guys. That is my review on chapter 177, but I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on this chapter, your positives, your negatives, and what do you want to happen in these next 2 chapters, because I don't know if we're going to get a satisfying conclusion, but what is the one thing that you want to happen before this series comes to an end? Leave that down in the comments below, and if you guys want to talk more about Tokyo Ghoul, feel free to follow me on Twitter. A link to my Twitter account can also be found in the description down below. But that's going to do it for me here, guys. So until next week, when we have chapter 178 of Tokyo Ghoul Re, I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye, guys.